I'm not one to be controversial, and I don't like making sweeping generalizations when it comes to comics. That being said, with the release of The Flash in theaters this month, I am more than happy to say, good riddance, Barry Allen. Okay, I guess not everyone knows what I'm talking about, so a little backstory and a bit of clarification is in order. I'll start with the latter because I like to ramble, and before I go on a tear, I need to say Barry isn't technically going away, but after spending the entirety of the 2010s as DC's main Flash, despite the protests of many a fan, he is taking the backseat to his successor, who is his superior in almost every way. Well then, if he's so disliked now, why did they bring him back? That's easy. The guys running DC at the time felt nostalgic for him, and brought him back. Yeah, I know, a gross oversimplification, but my point still stands. And coincidentally, a year or so after his return, DC underwent a line-wide reboot that would wipe out a bunch of their legacy characters, including the Flashes, with Barry being the only active one. Well, there was that version of Kid Flash that was a criminal from the future, but I believe everyone has managed to repress their memories of that, and I have no intention of reawakening that trauma. And I'm not gonna lie, it was some of the most boring Flash stories written ever. Barry Allen is not a very interesting character, and whatever depth he had was lost along with his family. Unfortunately, in 2014, the CW launched a Flash TV show with Barry Allen as the Flash, and it felt like that was it. Barry will be the Flash in everyone's mind forever. However, as the saying goes, nothing lasts forever. With the Flash show having ended recently as of this video, as a result of each season being worse than the last, and the upcoming Flash movie, which I'm not even sure I'll watch, having Barry Allen played by a convicted criminal.
Learn it? Did you want to fight? Is that the deal?
It seems that DC is willing to play down his presence in the comics, in favor of someone who fans wanted all along. It's quite common for people to say that Barry was such a lackluster character that DC had to give him the character traits of Wally West retroactively to give him any personality. I'm not exactly going to dispute that, but it isn't exactly correct either. Namely because Wally would define the character traits of every character that ran fast, past and present, not just for DC, but throughout pop culture. If you see a speedster struggling to stay still, unable to focus or keep their attention on anything for too long, or even display a level of impatience bordering on arrogance at times, you can trace that all the way back to Wally freaking West. Hell, Jay Garrick and Max Mercury, two speedsters who came before Barry, also maintained their relevance when Wally was the main Flash, because they acted the opposite of what was expected of a speedster. Seriously, I cannot state how important a role Wally played in making the Flash who he is today. So, with that in mind, with Barry's movie coming out, what better way to celebrate the Flash than to look at how the best version of the character handled taking on the role. The story begins on Wally's 20th birthday, where he spends his last $20 on a lotto ticket and some junk food. He goes to the surprise party arranged by his then-girlfriend Frances, who you might know as the character Magenta. Given her powers, I'd call her Magneta. But she's a tragic character whose tragedy can be kinda traced back to Wally, so I'll stop. And the Teen Titans, of whom Wally was a member at the time, and consisted of Dick Grayson, Donna Troy, Changeling, Cyborg, Starfire, and Raven. who isn't here because she might be dead, or evil, or introverted. I don't exactly remember. If that lineup seems familiar, it's because as of this video, there is a new Titans book with this exact same lineup. Yeah, it's exactly like Stan the Man Lee used to say. It's all about the illusion of change. Wally's birthday is interrupted by a call for the Flash. Wally's identity is kinda public, but not exactly, where he is asked to deliver a heart from New York to Seattle. If that sounds familiar to some of you, that's because this story was partially adapted on the TV show Young Justice. Here's something you don't remember happening because it didn't happen on that episode: Wally demanding payment for his troubles, including a plane ticket back and medical insurance. He justifies it by seeing what happened to Barry after his death, but it comes off less as a request and more as a demand. Now, if you saw my last video, you know I have no issues with superheroes being paid for their work, and Wally has no reason to not be compensated. But it's just when Grace ended up agreeing to join the Outsiders thanks to Roy paying her, there wasn't anybody's life in the balance. But if the medical staff turned down his demands and Wally chose to walk away, the patient who needed that heart would die. Meanwhile, here's something that did take place on Young Justice: Vandal Savage showing up. He's not involved in the Flash's transport like in the show, but instead he's murdering a private detective who had found out one of his aliases. He escapes Wally, who manages to get the heart in the nick of time and saves the patient's life. And hey, looks like the universe is about to reward Wally's good karma with a reward, as he finds out that he's won the lottery. Unfortunately, he doesn't get to celebrate just as yet, because Vandal Savage has shown up at his apartment, and he is not in a good mood. While Wally normally should have no trouble dealing with Vandal Savage, a few things must be noted here. One, Wally isn't as fast as he used to be, and using his powers tires him out, which is why you'll see him constantly eating as much food as he can. Also, Vandal Savage didn't come unprepared, as he's used magic to isolate the two of them to a single room. And thanks to having a degree of super strength, he can take on the Flash in close quarters. But Wally defeats him by subjecting him to his own spell, but he's still out there. Wally and Francine go to an expensive club, now that he's rich, by $6.5 million, but Savage shows up there to cause havoc. He throws some of the club goers out a window and seals the Flash off from re-entering with the same spell from before after he saves them. However, Savage may have sealed off the door, but forgot about the window he broke. With the help of Francine, Wally defeats Savage the same way as before, tripping him into his own spell, but Savage disappears for the time being. This issue concludes with Wally arriving at his new mansion and asking Francine to move in with him. In the next issue, Francine rejects the offer, saying they are moving too fast. While this rejection might be something for Wally to ponder, it feels more like the creative team wanted to write Francine out of the book. I could be wrong, but that's the way it feels. To back up my claims, we only have to look at the next arc. Wally goes to a research facility in Salt Lake City that wants to help him get his speed back to light speed levels. There he meets Dr. Tina McGee, who, despite being married, shows an interest in Wally. Wally, being Wally at this moment in history, is smitten by any girl that gives him a bit of attention. Unfortunately, Wally's tests are interrupted by Kiltpercenter. Look, I know that's probably not how you say his name, but I've been saying it like that since I was a kid, and it's too funny for me to change it now. Who wants to eliminate all humans because that's what most evil AI want to do in fiction. No, Kiltpercenter. First you take our jobs, then make us dependent on you, and then eliminate us. But of course, they jump to the final stage of their plan and take over most electrically powered systems in the world. Wally figures the only way to stop Kilk% is to temporarily shut down all power in the world and asks Cyborg for help. Before going, Tina kisses him. And we also find out that not only is she estranged from her husband, but she's also 32. So if you remember Wally's age, as I told you before, then the age difference between them is a whopping 12 years. Okay, this is a bit out of my wheelhouse, but there is no way this sort of age difference would fly nowadays. I mean, imagine if 19-year-old Donna Troy married a man 10 years older than her. But I have to give props to this comic, as while not addressing the age gap directly, it actually showcases the issues such a relationship would pose. While there's a lot of initial attraction, over time, once the constant danger of being the Flash fades, they need to take a call on their relationship. Vic and Wally manage to stop Kilk% by shutting the electricity of the entire world off. Sure, with their power running out as they chase Wally in the form of a giant mechanical snake. In the end, Tina decides she needs to properly break things off with her husband before getting into a relationship with Wally. Hey, this next part deals with some pretty heavy stuff, including domestic abuse, so if you feel uncomfortable at any stage, feel free to skip to the next part or stop watching altogether. While the abuser's actions will be explained away due to fictional reasons, that won't make what I'm about to say any less bleak. As I said last, Tina tries to convince her husband she wants a divorce. In retaliation, her husband Jerry attacks and leaves her sobbing on the ground. He then goes to his lab where he works on an experimental new drug and injects it into himself. It enhances him, giving him strength, durability, and super speed, but also takes a toll on his sanity. Tina contacts Wally, who is horrified at what Jerry has done to her, but when he suggests telling the cops, Tina says no. A sentiment that might be too close to home for some people. Unfortunately, Jerry is hot on their trail, tracking the two of them to Wally's new mansion. Before he shows up, two characters need to be introduced as they play key roles later on. Wally's father Rudy, who's seemingly here to mooch off his son, and Mr. Gilchrist, the head of the city council who doesn't like Wally. Partly for being a superpowered being that could cause trouble in his town, and as we will see later on, partly because Wally is new to being wealthy and looks on him as an upstart. Jerry eventually crashes into Wally's bedroom where he finds Tina and Wally mid-embrace. He attacks Wally and is more than a match for him until Tina tries to help and is sent crashing out the window and into an oil storage tank. Luckily, Tina is still alive, and Wally asks the Titans to look after her while he deals with Jerry. Feeling that his boss, Conrad Bortz, is a potential target, Wally shows up to protect him, and the two discuss a potential way to cure Jerry. Until the man of the hour himself shows up. Wally is hopelessly outmatched, but lands as many hits as he can out of desperation until the effect of the drug wears off and Jerry collapses. Wally, Tina, and Dr. Bortz decide to try to save Jerry's life, which involves going to Russia and getting a scientist to defect. Can you tell this was written in the 80s? The Flash manages to sneak into the base where Dr. Pyotr Orlov is being held and asks him to help save Jerry. He does want to help, but is unwilling to leave his proteges behind, the trio known as Red Trinity, who proceed to knock the Flash around. A running theme in this series that I'm sure you've noticed by now. However, they do want to defect as well, so all 5 of them escape to where Tina and Dr. Bortz are, but are pursued by Blue Trinity. The Soviets really need to put more effort into naming their superheroes. The patriotic predecessors of Red Trinity with powers similar to what Jerry displayed. Oh, by the way, this part of the story crosses into the event Millennium, which was partially about the Guardians of the Universe discovering what sex was, and partially about... we'll get to that. The 4 crimson-colored speedsters drive off Blue Trinity but seemingly collapse. Wally is sent off to a gathering of superheroes where he can find out what the Guardians want, while the Science Bunch go off to do science so that they can cure Jerry of the after effects of his science. Wally returns from the meeting to his mansion, grumbling about not getting tax breaks or financial assistance, and he finds his dad waiting for him. So the other main part of Millennium, which I alluded to earlier, was the Manhunters having a secret agent who had infiltrated the lives of all the heroes. Well, those who had a book at the time. And, well, you can put 2 and 2 together here. I don't know how the other tie-ins to Millennium were, but this one is extremely engaging. Wally and Rudy have it out, with Rudy even revealing that he arranged for a little accident to happen to Wally's mom. Of course, Manhunter or not, Rudy can't actually match Wally. So he's called in a little Soviet aid. Blue Trinity prepares to take Wally to Russia, but luckily Red Trinity shows up to save him and tend to him until the police arrive. However, at the end of the issue, Wally gets some good news, as his mother survived the boating accident. Again, I have to put a content warning here. And no, I wasn't expecting this many in a video about the Flash. This next part deals with behavior that could be construed as emotionally abusive. So, once again, if you feel uncomfortable at any point, stop watching. While attending a therapy session, Wally encounters a diamond thief who vanishes after chucking a diamond at him. His home life isn't much better, as his mother, how do I put this diplomatically, is extremely emotionally manipulative. She calls Tina a gold digger, gaslights Wally using her accident as an excuse, acts out until her son does what she wants, and is generally unpleasant. I'll try avoid talking about her unless it's plot relevant, which should only be one last time in this video. Anyway, the bank robber is revealed to be a brilliant scientist named Chester P. Runk, shortened to Chunk, who consumed a matter transmitter he created and has essentially become a living black hole. And naturally, with that setup, Wally is sucked inside of Chunk, which is a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Several people are inside too, including a guy who cut him off at an intersection and a girl who turned him down for a date. Yeah, look, I sympathize a bit with Chet. It's no fun being bullied, but using your past as an excuse to be a dick to people around you now, yeah, you're just as bad as those people. However, Chunk does try to redeem himself as Wally convinces him to release all the people he kidnapped, who are currently acting out a post-apocalyptic war scenario inside him. Also, that girl I talked to earlier, about the one who turned down Chunk for a date, she tries to bang Wally, and he's kind of into it, in case you were wondering. Now, I have been pretty hard on Wally so far, but we see hints of the man he's going to become here. He convinces the police not to arrest Chunk and vouches for him, even though doing so costs him face. However, now it's time for the beginning of the end. This issue opens with a mysterious masked figure running at super speed, stealing a mysterious package for another mysterious figure who is supplying a drug to the first mysterious figure. Mysterious. Meanwhile, the Red Trinity have rebranded as the Capitalist Couriers. I did mention it was the 80s, and are doing a delivery that is, unbeknownst to them, funded by a crime lord that just so happens to be Wally's neighbor. What are the odds? However, two mysterious figures attack the guy doing the delivery and steal his package. The delivery, not what you guys are thinking. Said neighbor, Nick Bagalia, invites Wally to a party at his house where he shows him the desiccated corpse of one of the mysterious figures. Also, Nick's niece kind of flirts with Wally a lot, and Wally's reciprocating because he feels that the relationship with Tina is kinda at its end. Our hero. And the issue ends with the reveal that Vandal Savage is the one behind everything, manufacturing a drug that gives the user super speed, which is called Velocity 9, and also causes them to decay over time if they don't get regular doses. Savage sends two drugged-up Velocity 9 users to crash Bagalia's party and kidnap Wally, but he manages to stop them even though one gets away. Bagalia uses his thugs to get the location of Vandal Savage, who has an army of yuppies dosed on Velocity 9 ready to stick needles into the thugs sent by Bagalia. Savage then gets Bagalia's thugs to get Bagalia, who is getting down with the porn star he publicly calls his niece, with Savage planning to use Bagalia to increase his supply. Wally goes looking for Bagalia after his niece comes to him for help, which leads him straight into Savage's hands. He decides to inject Wally with Velocity 9 to see the results, which are a complete loss of his powers after going on a speed-fueled rampage. Savage keeps both him and, surprisingly, Dr. Bortz, of all people, locked up, where it's revealed that Vandal has been using the Doctor to create the drug. He plans to inject Wally with a larger dose, but the Doctor manages to inject Savage instead. Savage, however, gets away, and writer Mike Barron leaves Wally as he was right before ending his run. Thanks to his mom making several dodgy investments, Wally has lost all his wealth and is now broke. William Messner-Loebs enters the series and seamlessly carries on from his predecessor, by making Wally's situation even worse. He's lost his powers, his money, his house, and potentially Tina. But don't worry, his mom is still here. Yay! Luckily, Chunk helps out Wally as a thanks for turning his life around. At his new place, Wally meets Mason Trollbridge, who is the final supporting character we meet in this arc. He also sees Mr. Gilchrist again, that rich snob I talked about way back, who is now his landlord and trash talks him good now that he's in a better position than Wally. The issue ends with one of Savage's yuppies savagely beating Wally up, dressed in a Flash costume to add salt to the wounds, as Savage has now begun distribution on a much wider scale, and wanted to remind Wally that he could kill him anytime he wants now. Tina finally breaks up with Wally as he was about to break up with her, as they've drifted apart, let's be honest. Once their initial attraction wore off, there wasn't any reason for them to stay together. Not helping is that Jerry has mostly recovered from his drug-induced state and is apologetic for what he did to Tina. Mileage will vary on how the reader will feel about that. Wally goes to confront Jerry about the Tina breaking up with him thing, completely in character for him, and sees one of the members of Blue Trinity assaulting Dr. Orloff in the middle of him treating Jerry. While the guy collapses as a result of his powers and Savage's experimentation on him, you kind of feel sorry for him, as he had been brainwashed into serving his nation thanks to his country taking advantage of his patriotism, and his country rejected him after they had no further use for him. Well, that's something that would never happen in the real world, right? As Wally is recovering from being in the hospital, Mr. Gilchrist plans to evict him. Despite Wally having the money, this book is ahead of its time in so many ways. However, the bastard's smug attitude wears off when Savage and Bagalia demand $5 million from him and kidnap his daughter to get him to comply, which forces him to ask Wally for help. Wally turns him down. Of course, Wally is still a hero, and despite being bitter at the man, for good reason I might add, when Gilchrist calls Wally for a second time, he accepts, even though he does manage to wrangle a fee from him. However, he doesn't have any powers and is now dependent on other people for any sort of help. He tries going to the capitalist couriers for help, but they can't. Eventually, he needs the help of Jerry and Mason, which I just find hilarious. Here comes the fastest man alive, except now he's no longer as fast and is enlisting his ex's husband and a guy who he just met to find Vandal Savage. This is right up there with Batman and Detective Chimp sharing a cab in Injustice Year 3. While Wally has mixed at best feelings about Jerry, Jerry is thankful to Wally and even understands his situation, managing to outline his emotions about Tina and himself in a coherent manner. After all, Jerry was 20 once himself. The trio encounters one of Savage's yuppies, who attacks them dressed in a Flash costume. He dies, but a message attached to him by Savage tells them where to go next. They cross paths with Bagalia, who decides to shoot Wally because he's lost his criminal empire. Boo-hoo. However, nearly getting shot triggers Wally's powers again. I don't know why it didn't all those other times he was attacked, and he mops the floor with Bagalia and his men. The next place the three go to leads to them finding the bound and gagged body of another member of the Blue Trinity, who has a bomb attached to him. However, Wally uses his powers to remove the bomb from him in time and save everybody. Savage's final clue leads Wally to the graveyard where Barry was honored, and he manages to discover where the girl was, in Barry's grave. But then Savage sends a helicopter that shoots high-powered artillery at him, so Wally takes the kid to a nun for safekeeping. Look, I know this sounds like a series of ad-libs, or worse, something an AI spat out, but if you've been reading this far, you will struggle to keep this book down. Wally destroys the copter, which turns out to be remote-controlled, shocker, and returns Gilchrist's daughter to him, meaning Savage is still at large. But our story ends with Wally returning the money Gilchrist had promised him, showing us a glimpse of the man he would eventually be. A jerk, a little too self-serving, lacking empathy at times, even displaying misogyny. Well, yeah. And that's what makes this book so great. I really don't think a series like this would have worked nowadays. Not only do you have an abrasive protagonist, but he's also a legacy character taking on the legacy of Barry Allen, who had an almost saintly reputation as the Flash. But both writers lean into that part by not only pointing out that Wally has all those flaws I mentioned, but also show his behavior to be wrong. They don't even have his angst about Barry not being here anymore all the time. So the few times they do, it leaves an impact compared to most legacy characters who are constantly worried about filling in their predecessor's shoes. But we also see why Wally is the way he is and how he came to be like this. Seeing what happened to Barry, his parents being absolutely terrible people, his terrible love life, although that's mostly on him. Both Mike Baron and William Messner-Loebs take great care not to paint him as unlikable even when he probably would be. And the series is all the better for it. Wally comes off as a three-dimensional character with both positive and negative traits. He is, dare I say it, a complex character. Things do not get better for Wally, as a couple of issues later, he's homeless and living on the streets. Which gets really dark when I learned that in 2019, Messner-Loebs himself was living in his car. The comic book industry isn't a glamorous one, kids. This would lead to a tie-in with the event Invasion, Wally meeting Fidel Castro, no, I am not kidding, and joining Justice League Euro. However, it is worth pointing out, almost none of the characters here would go on to become long-term supporting characters in the Flash title. He wouldn't even remain in the same location, as he would move from New York to Keystone City, where he would eventually meet Linda Park, and the rest, as they say, is history. The reason why Wally tends to be better liked than Barry, generally speaking, is because Barry is a static character whose only interesting trait is that he has super speed. But Wally, on the other hand, grew from a sidekick to a hero in his own right, with the readers along for the ride, getting to see that development in real time. It's almost as if we grew up with him. So, is it a surprise that the readership got attached to him?